The conflict between objective morality and subjective morality remains one of the central debates in the field of philosophy. This issue is particularly significant when considering humanitarianism, an ethical stance centered on promoting human welfare and alleviating human suffering. Is there a universal, objective standard for what constitutes a humane action? Or is the concept of morality relative to individual or cultural perspectives? This question has profound implications for ethics, law, politics, and social behavior. Philosophers throughout history have wrestled with the implications of these moral viewpoints. Objective morality suggests that moral truths exist independently of human beliefs, while subjective morality contends that moral values are shaped by individual preferences, emotions, or societal conventions. In the context of humanitarianism, these two approaches clash over whether there are universal ethical standards that should guide our actions toward others, or whether moral decisions are contingent on personal perspectives and circumstances. This video will explore the implications of both objective and subjective morality, examining how each framework addresses the concept of humanitarianism. It will analyze the strengths and weaknesses of both moral approaches, with reference to key philosophical arguments, and conclude by reflecting on the potential reconciliation or irreconcilability of these two perspectives in the pursuit of a humane society. Objective morality posits that moral values and duties exist independently of human beliefs, cultures, and opinions. According to this view, there are moral truths that are universally applicable to all individuals, regardless of their personal or cultural inclinations. Ethical principles, in this sense, are discovered rather than created. The concept of objective morality has been articulated in various ways by several prominent philosophers, including Immanuel Kant, John Locke, and Plato. One of the most influential arguments for objective morality comes from Immanuel Kant, who proposed the idea of the categorical imperative. Kant argued that moral actions are not contingent on personal desires or consequences but must be guided by principles that could be universally applied. According to Kant, a moral act is one that could be universally willed without contradiction. For instance, lying is inherently wrong because if everyone lied, trust would be undermined and communication would become impossible. Thus, Kant's philosophy offers a framework for universal ethical behavior, grounded in reason and the recognition of inherent human dignity. In the realm of humanitarianism, objective morality suggests that there are universal human rights and duties that transcend cultural and societal differences. For example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, adopted by the United Nations in 1948, reflects an attempt to establish objective standards for human dignity and well-being. According to this view, humanitarian principles, such as the right to life, liberty, and security, are not subject to the whims of individual nations or cultures, but are inherent to all human beings by virtue of their shared humanity. Philosophers advocating for objective morality argue that without universal standards of morality, we risk a relativistic world where actions such as slavery, genocide, and oppression might be justified under the guise of cultural or personal preferences. From this standpoint, humanitarianism demands that we recognize a moral duty to protect human life and dignity, regardless of geographical, cultural, or ideological boundaries. In contrast to objective morality, subjective morality asserts that moral values and principles are not universal, but are shaped by individual experiences, emotions, and social contexts. According to this view, moral judgments are contingent on personal beliefs or cultural norms, and there are no absolute moral truths that apply to all people. Instead, what is considered right or wrong is a reflection of the individual's or society's preferences and interpretations. The roots of subjective morality can be traced to David Hume, who argued that moral judgments are not derived from reason but from sentiment or emotion. For Hume, our moral choices are influenced by feelings such as sympathy and empathy, rather than objective rational principles. In this framework, individuals or societies may vary in their moral beliefs based on their cultural upbringing, historical context, and personal experiences. There are no universal moral standards. Instead, morality is relative to the individual or community. From a humanitarian perspective, subjective morality raises important questions about whether it is possible to impose universal standards of human rights or welfare on diverse cultures. If morality is relative, then the imposition of one set of ethical principles across different societies may be seen as an infringement on cultural autonomy or an example of cultural imperialism. For example, certain practices that are considered humane in one society, such as animal rights protections or gender equality, may not be viewed in the same light in another society due to differing cultural norms. Friedrich Nietzsche, a key figure in subjective moral theory, famously declared that God is dead, suggesting that traditional, objective moral systems were no longer viable in the modern world. For Nietzsche, moral values were not inherent in the world but were created by individuals and societies. This view challenges the idea that there can be an overarching, objective standard for human welfare and calls into question the legitimacy of imposing such standards on others. In the context of humanitarianism, subjective morality presents the challenge of navigating cross-cultural differences in the understanding of human rights and welfare. What one culture sees as a humanitarian imperative, another may view as unnecessary or even harmful. For example, some societies may place a higher value on community or collective well-being, while others prioritize individual rights and autonomy. This tension highlights the difficulty in establishing a universally accepted notion of humanitarianism when moral values are not shared across cultures. The debate between objective and subjective morality has profound implications for humanitarian action. On one hand, objective morality provides a foundation for universal human rights and humanitarian principles that transcend cultural boundaries. On the other hand, subjective morality calls into question the possibility of imposing one set of moral standards on diverse populations, suggesting that such imposition may violate cultural or individual autonomy. Humanitarianism based on objective morality supports the idea that there are certain actions that can be deemed universally right or wrong, regardless of local customs or personal beliefs. For instance, humanitarian interventions, such as those aimed at ending human trafficking or genocide, might be justified under the assumption that such practices are universally immoral, regardless of the culture in which they occur. In this view, the international community has a moral duty to intervene in the affairs of sovereign nations when humanitarian crises arise, even if this means violating the autonomy of those nations. However, critics of objective morality in humanitarianism might argue that such interventions can lead to cultural imperialism. They might point to instances where Western interventions in the global South have been justified on the grounds of human rights, only to result in unintended consequences or the imposition of foreign values that conflict with local traditions. This criticism suggests that a more subjective or relativistic approach to humanitarianism, which takes into account the cultural and historical context of different societies, might be more appropriate. For example, the concept of gender equality is viewed differently across various cultures. In some societies, certain practices that the West deems oppressive to women, such as arranged marriages or dress codes, may be accepted as part of their cultural fabric. From a subjective moral perspective, imposing Western standards of gender equality may be seen as an imposition of foreign values that disregard the cultural context in which those practices occur. Given the challenges posed by both objective and subjective morality, one may wonder whether it is possible to reconcile these two approaches in the pursuit of a humane society. Some philosophers have proposed moral pluralism as a potential solution, suggesting that while there may be universal moral principles that are broadly shared, such as the protection of life and freedom from suffering, the application of these principles may vary depending on context and individual perspectives. Moral pluralism argues that there is room for multiple valid moral systems, each of which provides a different way of understanding and promoting human welfare. In this framework, it is possible to maintain a commitment to universal human rights while acknowledging the diversity of moral perspectives that exist across cultures. Humanitarianism, then, could be understood as a process of negotiation and dialogue where common values, such as the desire to reduce suffering, can be shared across different societies, even if the specific means of achieving those goals may vary. Moreover, dialogue and empathy are essential in bridging the gap between objective and subjective moralities. By engaging in respectful conversations with those from different cultural or moral backgrounds, we can build a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of what it means to act humanely. Such an approach recognizes the legitimacy of diverse moral viewpoints while striving to find common ground in the pursuit of alleviating human suffering and promoting well-being. The conflict between objective and subjective morality presents a significant challenge for the theory and practice of humanitarianism. On one hand, objective morality provides a foundation for universal human rights and ethical standards, while subjective morality emphasizes the importance of cultural and personal contexts in shaping moral judgments. Both perspectives offer valuable insights into the nature of human welfare and the ethical obligations we have to others. However, they also pose fundamental questions about the nature of morality, the limits of cultural diversity, and the potential for cross-cultural dialogue. Ultimately, the reconciliation of objective and subjective morality may lie in a pluralistic approach to humanitarianism, one that seeks to respect cultural differences while advocating for universal values such as the protection of life, dignity, and freedom from suffering. In a world characterized by moral diversity, it is essential to strike a balance between universal ethical principles and the recognition of individual and cultural variations in moral understanding. By doing so, we can create a more humane and compassionate world that respects both the universality of human rights and the richness of cultural diversity. Thank you for accompanying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below so we can discuss. Wish you and your family good health.